Welcome back to Self Transformation Radio, my friend. I'm glad you're here. I'm at the Sam Houston Jones State Park in quite beautiful Lake Charles, Louisiana. Although it's not really that beautiful by my usual standards and preferences right now. I am the type of person who really enjoys sunshine, and I live in Florida, so I also appreciate a cool breeze. But man, y'all, it has been so cold and rainy today that I even turned on my diesel heater to stay warm. It has been very cold and windy. I did spend the morning outside, and I was wearing two jackets at one point. It eventually got too cold for my comfort, so I moved inside where I am now in the van. It helps that I have so many windows in my van, too. When I first got it, I had no windows at all because it was a cargo van. It had the front windows, of course, but yeah, my builders put in a big side window, two kind of sliding bunk windows in the back, and then two big rear windows. So right now, I'm sitting next to a big window, and it's quite lovely. I'm next to someone else that just pulled in, but I can't see them when I look to my immediate left, so the way that the park is set up is quite nice. Makes me feel like I have my own little campsite and that I'm not really in a campground. I do prefer sites that have more trees surrounding the spots. Like Fort DeSoto, you can barely see the people next to you because you're separated by trees, and that's really cool. But this particular campground went through quite a few hurricanes in the last couple years, and they've had to tear down a lot and build things back. I'm super grateful to be here, even though it is raining and cold out today and yesterday and probably tomorrow. I do really love state parks. They bring me right into the middle of nature. I was able to snap a picture of a mama and a baby deer that walked by my campsite as I was working outside earlier this morning. It was magical. That would never happen at an RV park. And I've actually been posting vlogs on YouTube about what I've been doing at almost every campsite that I've been to so far. And I'm going to put a link to my YouTube channel in the show notes if you are interested in coming along for more of the van life stuff. It's true to that classic vlog style where I have my camera set up and I'm talking to you like you're in the room with me and we're chatting about what's going on, how I'm feeling, what I'm thinking. And yeah, great segue, Caitlin. Speaking of thinking, I'm here today to help you with your thinking. Maybe you've got some stinking thinking and you want to get to the bottom of it and figure out why that's happening. If that's you, you're in the right spot. You're going to get some great insight into the root cause of that stinking thinking on this episode today. So let's get right into it with a question of the day I have for you. The question of the day is, what stories are you telling yourself? And how do you know it's really you telling those stories? Would it surprise you to hear me say that you are not your body? That might sound like it's coming out of left field, but hang on with me here. I remember the first time that I realized that I was not my body. I was actually working out, and it dawned on me that I was punishing myself with my workout and being angry with myself for not being able to do the exercise the way I felt like I should. I was shooting all over myself, right? And I also believed my body was me and it needed to go through something grueling and punishing for not behaving properly, which usually meant not being thin enough or not doing the movement the correct way. But learning to detach from the belief that I am my body and my body is me is what helped me overcome a primal fear that many humans deal with, and that is the fear of death. It is the number one unconscious fear of all human beings, at least during some point in their lives. Just look at what happened in 2020, people. Like, people were just afraid of dying, and that is how they were so easily manipulated. People were so easily manipulated because of the fear of dying or of other people that they loved dying or being thought of as someone who didn't care if other people died. Like, a lot of manipulation was going on. This is the number one unconscious fear of all of us, at least, during some point in our lives, especially if we've never gone through a self-transformation or spiritual awakening experience. Once I started to understand that I was not my body, that I was actually some kind of being who was inhabiting my body, that my body was simply a vessel, an instrument, or a vehicle I was in control of, everything changed. I saw everything differently when that one belief changed. I'm going to tell you another fear that humans have, and that is lack. Fear of lack, fear of scarcity, fear of the not enoughness. And this is a big one because so many of us believe in it. I believed in it too, and that's because it was ingrained into me at a young age. We all have it ingrained into us. It's how our very flawed society works and keeps us divided by instilling in us that this world we live in is limited in resources and that there isn't enough for every person in it. It's an extremely limited mindset that is perpetuated by powerful entities who make the most money when we are powerless, afraid, and impoverished. That's because if we believe it's the earth running out of resources or the government running out of money and shutting down, we won't notice that it's actually these powerful entities behind the scenes who are using the same old scare tactics to maintain control over us. It's easy to control us when we're scared of not having enough, whether it's food or some other resource. When we believe that not enoughness is a certain reality or our certain future, then it is less likely that people will give generously and understand that coming together as a unified whole, where there's strength in numbers, is a much safer and more effective way to live than under the control of a very powerful few like we find ourselves now. And there's not much profit for those powerful people to make when we're living in peace and prosperity, is there? No, there's not. The belief in lack is actually not your real belief, though. It's not really yours. Hear me out. Lack is actually the first belief of your ego. Now, what is the ego? Maybe you've heard of it. I used to think that it was like the type of person who was like an egotistical maniac, right? I can remember being 14, 15 years old, and there was this kid in my youth group who I named a big egotistical jerk because he was just so overconfident and didn't care what anybody else thought in like an unhealthy way, right? And I had labeled him as like an egomaniac or egotistical jerk. But that's actually a very shallow way of seeing the ego. And at 14 or 15, I knew what I knew, right? But the ego is that fearful little voice in your head. Fearful little voice that can't predict the future, but thinks it can. The ego wants to keep you safe. And it is the ego who will remind you of all the stuff you've been taught in the past in order to convince you to stay safe, not to step out of your comfort zone, to try anything new, or to be, do, or have anything different than what it already thinks it knows. But in truth, the ego has no idea that that new idea you've been entertaining, like maybe starting your own business or moving house to someplace else, starting over somehow. The ego has no idea that that idea is perfectly safe and will catapult your life to the next level. It's simply using what it has, which is only past experiences, past information. And it's using that to do what it can to maintain homeostasis, which sounds like a crazy word, but all it means is it wants to keep things the same. It wants to keep you the same because that's where it's safe. Right? And this is a huge reason why so many people are stuck. They don't realize this ego, this subconscious programming that's running in the background is not actually who they are. In fact, they often mistake their ego for their intuition or their gut, and their ego becomes their identity. I can assure you, however, that the ego will never try to get you out of your comfort zone. It will never encourage you to try something you've never done before or do anything that even remotely scares you. That's your intuition's job. But so often we get stuck with the fear-based reasoning of the ego and make decisions about our future based on hugely, majorly outdated information from the past. We're living in the past. And you know what else? Most of what the ego worries about is never going to happen. Because it all has information from the past. That's all it has. And so when I ask, what kind of stories are you telling yourself? I want to clarify what I mean by stories as well. It doesn't have to be a chapter book length story, right? A story can be a single sentence. Maybe your stories sound like a statement like this: I don't have enough money. I'll never get ahead. Something bad always happens to me. I can't do anything without serious assistance from someone else. I'm an idiot. Oh, it's just going to take too long. And that last one's my favorite because, hello, the time will pass anyway, and where will you be when it does if you don't do the thing that's going to take too long? You're going to be exactly where you are right now, and you already know that's not where you want to be. I'm talking to myself, the past versions of myself who was saying, oh, it will just take too long, blah, blah, blah. Another thing I want you to know is that stories are not facts. Stories come from beliefs. What we believe about ourselves is creating the story of our entire life, even if we believe it isn't. That's because we often believe our stories are facts, even when they're not. But because we believe in the stories so strongly, and it is usually unconsciously, that we believe in them because it's our norm, our status quo, right? Because we believe in the stories so strongly, our life unfolds according to those stories. So, say you believe you'll never get ahead. Guess what? It's extremely unlikely that you'll ever get ahead, whatever getting ahead means for you. You created that reality for yourself with your belief. This is what you create your own reality really means. I know it can sound woo-woo and hokey, but that is literally all it means. Here's another example. Say you believe you'll never lose weight because you've always been heavy or that it runs in your family to be overweight. It is highly likely that you will never take actions outside of what keeps you living the reality you created with your belief that you will never lose weight. Does that make sense? Nod with me. I can see it through your phone if you're nodding, so just humor me here. But the good news here is that it works both ways. Say you learn how to shift your belief in who you are to someone who can easily lose weight because of your identity that you are a healthy person. That belief will transform into thoughts, feelings, and actions that will create that exact reality for you. Now, does that happen overnight? No, of course not. We wouldn't be able to handle overnight results like that mentally or physically. The body knows what it's doing, and patience is key when consciously creating a positive new reality for ourselves. So we know that thoughts create things. Our beliefs are shaping our very perception of reality. This means then that any perception of lack or scarcity in your life is just an indication of a false belief in your mind that lack is real, that scarcity is real. Again, your thoughts create things. So if we think we'll always be broke and that's why we can't afford to uplevel our lives, then we won't even bother learning how or taking any steps to create more wealth in our lives. We don't believe it's possible, so it isn't. It truly is as simple as that. And speaking of wealth, I mentioned wealth. That brings me to the other topic I want to unpack a little bit on the show today. And there's so much that I can speak of about this. I just want to touch on it here. What is wealth? What is it? Most people think it's money, but that is not actually what wealth is. Wealth is value, plain and simple. Wealth can be created. And if wealth can be created, then that means it is infinite. Lack cannot exist in the infinite. And that's why having a mindset of lack is your worst enemy when it comes to creating wealth, because the only thing you lack with a mindset of lack is an understanding that lack can't exist in the same place that wealth exists. So what actually exists? Is it lack or wealth? The cool part is that you get to choose. And this is where some people get confused, okay? Wealth is just value. All value is created. So if you can create value, which you can, everybody can, then you can also create wealth. Think of the ways you are currently creating value in your life. If you're having a hard time seeing it, understanding what I mean by this. Think of the ways you're currently creating value in your life, and you're going to see the wealth that you've already created. And focusing on the wealth we have is the first step to creating more of it, by the way. So kudos to you. Great job. And if you're telling yourself a story that creating wealth is hard, check yourself, because it's only hard if you make it hard. Take it from me. Seriously, I spent the first 27 years of my life living with a lack mentality, and I wasn't aware of it. I just thought that's the way things were. And once I got fired from my corporate job, where I was creating value and wealth for somebody else, I started creating value independently as a freelancer, and the rest is history. It's mind-blowing to look back at the journey I've been on in the last decade, going from having a mortgage with my ex-husband on an $80,000 house to being financially free and also, incidentally, free of the husband too. Double win, but I digress. Look at all the value and wealth you've created in your life. Look at your family and your business if you have one, your home and living space, the meal you prepared today that was just ingredients before you worked your magic on it. All of that is value. And if you're living in a cardboard box right now, and I laugh as I say that because it's something I would always remind myself of back when I was training myself to shed the lack belief or the scarcity mentality. You'll never have to live in a box under a bridge, Caitlin, is what I would say. So if you're living in a cardboard box right now, I want you to understand that you are still capable of creating wealth. The wealth comes from within you. And I would not be wealthy myself today had I not taken what was inside my mind and made it appear in reality around me. I didn't know every single step to getting there before I got started. In fact, if I had known everything that would happen to me in the next 10 years on day one, I never would have gotten started at all because I hadn't yet become the person I needed to be to handle all of it. So it would have scared me way too much for me to take any action on it. And every step to creating wealth matters. It is a process. You are the process. And that process is how you become a wealthy person. You have to be willing to step into the process, step into the identity. It all starts within your mind. All wealth starts within someone's mind. Even real estate. Somebody had to create every aspect of every single piece of real estate at one point. Every business started first just as a figment of someone's imagination. And every expert was once a beginner. I know not everyone shares their background stories and beginner stories with you, and I get that. I think people are afraid of others knowing who they were and judging them for it. I can understand that, but my thoughts on that are just let them judge. People can judge me on my past, but I don't live there anymore. I know there are people out there who, back when I was experiencing bipolar-like symptoms in 2018, 2020, have now labeled me in their minds as crazy, or if they're a little nicer, somebody who is in denial of their incurable mental disorder. Yeah, perhaps seeing the work that I'm doing now, they might label me as in denial or just like a ticking time bomb that's just asking for relapse. Especially being so irresponsible as living in a van right now. It has a stigma attached to it, okay? And maybe they see my debut into the glories of this van life as a symptom of the disorder, right? Maybe they're the type of person who delights in others' misfortunes and likes to say, oh, I told you so, even if it's in private, and they're secretly hoping that I'll get sick again, just so they'll be right. Maybe you've got people in your life who are like that too. The kind who like to remind you of where you've supposedly failed in the past, like they somehow know something about you that you don't. Let them think whatever they want. I'm over here living my best life, saying just watch to my naysayers, and I invite you to do the same. Haters have been happening since I started my business. The haters come out of the woodwork to crap all over what I'm doing, to cast doubt and fear because it calls into question the way they are living their lives. They live in an imaginary land of sadness. It's a world of fear and lack and doubt. It's completely made up, a figment in their imagination, just like wealth. And what's awesome is that now that we can see how both lack and wealth are completely made up, completely created in our minds first, we can choose which one we want to invest our energy in, which one we want to make real. Isn't that exciting? Thoughts create things. What you believe about yourself is creating your things, or otherwise known, your reality. And the name of the game here is awareness. You want to become aware of what stories your ego is scribbling all over a giant flip chart or whiteboard, trying to justify why you absolutely positively must stay home and hunker down to avoid whatever storm that's coming that it can't see and doesn't know for sure that it exists, but it still assures you that it's coming. All because that's what may have happened in the past. Know that your ego is not you, just like you are not your body. You're something much more powerful than a body. And considering that you now know it's you who has the power to create reality with your thoughts, wouldn't you agree? Say it with me now. I am much more powerful than a body. Yeah. That's all for this week's episode, my friends. Thank you for tuning in and great work today. I'll see you in the next episode.